The grand hall of the Galactic Survey Council buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from dozens of star systems had gathered for an emergency session. At the center of the massive chamber, a holographic display showed a planet that made even the most seasoned explorers shudder. Xerion 7 hung in the projection like a scarred jewel. Its surface was a patchwork of jagged mountains, acid seas, and storm systems that moved in impossible patterns. The planet's red warning indicators blinked urgently around the display. Ambassador Thelvox of the Crystalline Collective rose from his seat. His crystal-based body chimed softly as he moved, a sound that usually indicated calm. Today it was sharp with stress. "Fellow council members," Thelvox began, his voice echoing through the chamber's translation systems. "We are here to discuss the final classification of planet Xerion 7. After 17 failed expeditions and the complete loss of the Zephyrian military unit last month, I believe we have no choice." The hologram shifted to show the wreckage of various spacecraft scattered across Xerion 7's surface. Each one represented hundreds of lives lost to the planet's hostile environment. "The Melodic Empire lost 30 researchers to the singing crystals," continued a delegate from the back. "The insectoid swarm lost an entire hive ship to the reality storms. Even our most advanced military units cannot survive more than 6 hours on that world." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The data was clear and terrifying. Xerion 7 had claimed the lives of over 2,000 beings from various species. The planet's gravity was 3 times galactic standard. Its atmosphere contained acids that could dissolve most known materials. Predators hunted in coordinated packs with intelligence that rivaled most sapient species. "The motion before us is simple," Thelvox announced. "Declare Xerion 7 a permanent exclusion zone. No further expeditions. No research missions. No exceptions." The vote was swift and unanimous. Every species represented had lost people to that world. The holographic display updated with a new classification: Extinction Class, Permanent Quarantine. 3 days later, aboard the human research vessel Wanderer, Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing the updated star charts when he noticed the new red marking. He leaned back in his chair and studied the data on Xerion 7 with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years exploring Earth's wilderness. "Hey, Lisa, come take a look at this," he called to his team's scientist. Dr. Lisa Chen walked over from her lab station, still wearing gloves from her latest experiment. She had joined Morrison's team after spending years studying extremophile, bacteria in Earth's most hostile environments. "What have you found, Jake?" she asked, looking at the display. Morrison pointed to Xerion 7's topographical data. "Look at this mountain range system, and these valley networks. The biodiversity readings are incredible. It's like Yellowstone mixed with the Himalayas." Chen frowned as she read the planet's classification. "Jake, this says it's an extinction class world. 17 failed expeditions. Complete environmental hostility." "I can see that," Morrison replied, scrolling through the atmospheric data. "But look at these numbers. The atmospheric composition isn't much different from what we dealt with during the Venus mining operations. The gravity is heavy, but we've trained in 3G environments." Sam Rodriguez looked up from where he was organizing their equipment stores. As the team's survival specialist, he had led expeditions through some of Earth's most dangerous regions. "What are we looking at, Captain?" Morrison transferred the data to the main screen. "A planet that the galactic community considers impossible to survive on. Hostile wildlife, dangerous terrain, unstable weather patterns." Rodriguez studied the information with interest. These predator behavior patterns look similar to wolfpack dynamics. The terrain shifts remind me of avalanche zones in the Rockies. The atmospheric readings... He paused. Actually, this is lighter than some of the industrial zones on Mars. Pete Williams, their communications officer, joined the discussion. He had grown up in Alaska and was no stranger to harsh environments. The temperature ranges are pretty extreme, but we've got gear rated for those conditions. Morrison pulled up more detailed scans of the planet's surface. Look at these geological formations. The mineral diversity here could advance our understanding of planetary formation by decades. And the biological data? He shook his head in amazement. This place is like a living laboratory. The Galactic Council just banned all expeditions to this world, Chen reminded them. They consider it unsurvivable. Maybe for them, Morrison replied thoughtfully. But humans have been surviving in hostile environments for thousands of years. We colonized Antarctica when most of our own planet considered it impossible. We built cities underwater and in space. Rodriguez was already making notes. If we're thinking about this seriously, we'd need to treat it like a high-altitude expedition. Extended duration gear, redundant safety systems, extensive preparation. The wildlife reports are interesting, Pete added. These razor hounds hunt in packs, but their behavior patterns follow predictable territorial models. The tunnel stalkers create seismic disturbances, but they follow geological fault lines. Morrison stood and began pacing, a habit he had developed during his years as a park ranger. Every environment has its patterns, its rules. Earth taught us that. You respect the environment, understand its dangers, prepare properly, and use your head. Chen was reading through the expedition reports. The previous team seemed to approach this as a military operation or a quick scientific survey. They tried to fight the environment instead of adapting to it. That's the difference, Morrison agreed. We're not trying to conquer this place. We're trying to understand it, learn from it. Rodriguez was already sketching equipment lists. We'd need atmospheric processors for long-term operations, kinetic weapons for the wildlife, seismic monitoring for the geological instabilities. And we'd need permission, Pete reminded them. The Council just declared this planet off-limits. Morrison smiled. We'll file a standard geological survey request, routine scientific expedition, nothing fancy. 3 hours later, their formal request was transmitted to Earth's colonial administration. Morrison's report described Zerion 7 as an excellent opportunity for extended environmental research and noted that the team was well-equipped for challenging terrain. He carefully avoided mentioning that every other species in the galaxy considered the planet a death sentence. When the response came back approving their mission, Morrison gathered his team. Well, people, looks like we're going camping. Extended duration, challenging conditions, but nothing we haven't trained for. Chen shook her head with a mix of amazement and concern. Jake, do you realize what we're about to attempt? Morrison looked at the image of Zerion 7 on his screen. To him, it didn't look like an impossible death world. It looked like the kind of place that had always called to human explorers. Wild, dangerous, unknown, and absolutely fascinating. Yeah, he said, quietly. We're going to show the galaxy what humans call a nice hiking trail. The emergency transmission from the Galactic Survey Council arrived, just as the human team was loading their equipment. Ambassador Thelvox's crystal form flickered urgently in the holographic display aboard the Wanderer. Captain Morrison, please. Tell me this is some kind of administrative error. Thelvox said, his usual calm completely gone. Our records show you have filed an expedition request for Zerion 7. Morrison looked up from the gear checklist he was reviewing with Rodriguez. That's correct, Ambassador. Standard geological survey mission. We're planning a month-long expedition to study the planet's unique mineral formations. The crystal being's form pulsed with what humans had learned to recognize as extreme distress. Captain, perhaps you did not receive the updated planetary classifications. Zerion 7 has been declared an extinction-class world. It is under permanent quarantine. We received the update, Morrison replied calmly. But our analysis suggests the planet is suitable for human exploration with proper preparation. Within hours, representatives from 6 different galactic civilizations had contacted the human expedition team. Each conversation followed the same pattern of disbelief and growing horror as the aliens realized the humans were serious. The Zephyrian military commander, who had lost his entire unit, was the most direct. Humans, you do not understand. My soldiers were equipped with the finest armor our technology can produce. They carried weapons that could level city blocks. They had force shields that could deflect plasma cannons. The planet killed them all. In less than 4 hours. Chen looked up from her equipment testing. What kind of environmental gear were they using? Environmental gear? The commander asked, confused. They were soldiers, not scientists. That explains a lot, Rodriguez muttered, checking the atmospheric processors they had loaded. Military gear is designed for combat, not environmental. Adaptation. The insectoid swarm representative was even more alarmed. The hive ship we lost contained 3,000 individuals with shared consciousness. They could coordinate perfectly, share sensory data instantly, and adapt to threats faster than any individual mind. The planet's reality storms scattered them across multiple dimensions. Pete Williams was reviewing the meteorological data. These storm patterns follow quantum mechanical principles. If you understand the mathematics, you can predict their movement and find safe zones. Mathematics? The insectoid buzzed in confusion. We are discussing forces that tear holes in space-time itself. Morrison paused his equipment loading to address the growing crowd of concerned alien representatives. Look, we appreciate your concern. We really do. But humans have been exploring dangerous environments for our entire history. We started in African savannas filled with predators that could kill us with a single bite. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We climbed mountains that had killed hundreds of people before us. The Melodic Empire's delegate played a haunting sequence of tones. The translation system rendered it as desperate pleading. The singing crystals drove our most mentally resilient individuals insane within minutes. The psychic frequencies they generate are beyond what any organic mind can process. Chen had been studying the crystal formations in the planet's geological data. The frequency patterns look like interference waves. Earth's electromagnetic environment is much more chaotic than most planets. Our brains probably evolved natural, filtering mechanisms. The aliens exchanged what appeared to be significant looks. Ambassador Thelvox spoke carefully. Captain Morrison, perhaps you could explain your team's qualifications for this mission. Morrison gestured to his crew. I spent 15 years as a park ranger in some of Earth's most dangerous wilderness areas. Grizzly bears, avalanche zones, extreme weather conditions. Lisa here is a xenobiologist who has studied life forms in environments that would kill most species instantly. I specialized in extremophile research, Chen added. Bacteria that live in volcanic vents, acid pools, and radiation zones. I've spent months at a time in environmental suits in conditions similar to Zarion 7. Rodriguez stepped forward. I'm a wilderness survival specialist. I've led rescue operations in the Himalayas, the Amazon rainforest, and the polar ice caps. I can keep a team alive in pretty much any environment if you give me the right equipment. Pete Williams nodded. Communications and navigation specialist. I grew up in Alaska, learned to read weather patterns and terrain from my grandfather who was a bush pilot. I can keep us in contact with the ship and find safe routes through unstable terrain. The alien representatives were quiet for a long moment. Finally, the Zephyrian commander spoke. Your qualifications are impressive, but you still do not understand. This is not simply a dangerous environment. It is a world that actively destroys everything that lands on it. The very laws of physics behave differently there. Morrison pulled up the detailed planetary scans on the main display. Actually, that's what makes it so interesting. Look at these readings. The gravitational anomalies follow predictable patterns. The atmospheric disturbances have mathematical relationships. The wildlife behavior patterns are consistent with territorial species under environmental stress. Every environment has rules, Rodriguez added. The key is understanding those rules and working with them instead of against them. The Crystalline Collective's representative chimed nervously. But the equipment failures. Every expedition has lost their technology within hours of landing. Chen smiled. That's because they were using standard galactic technology designed for normal environments. We're bringing equipment specifically designed for extreme conditions. Our atmospheric processors were originally built for the Venus terraforming project. Our shelters are rated for Class 5 storms. Our weapons are kinetic-based, not energy-based, so they won't be affected by electromagnetic interference. Morrison could see the aliens were still not convinced. Look, we understand you're concerned. 17 expeditions have failed, and that's a terrible tragedy. But those expeditions were approaching Zarion 7 as a hostile enemy to be conquered. We're approaching it as a challenging environment to be understood. The difference is important, Pete added. When you try to fight nature, you usually lose. When you try to understand and adapt to it, you can not only survive, but thrive. The holographic conference continued for another hour, with alien representatives presenting increasingly desperate arguments against the human expedition. They showed footage of destroyed equipment, played recordings of final transmissions, and displayed biological data from the few organic remains that had been recovered. Each piece of evidence only seemed to make the humans more interested. Morrison took notes on predator behavior patterns. Chen analyzed the biochemical data from the hostile plant life. Rodriguez calculated equipment requirements based on the environmental challenges. Pete studied the navigation difficulties posed by the reality storms. Finally, Ambassador Thelvox made one last attempt. Captain Morrison, I am authorized to offer your team priority access to any other planet in our survey database. Beautiful worlds with fascinating geology and biology, but without the extreme dangers of Zarion 7. Morrison looked at his team. Each of them nodded slightly. They had spent their careers seeking out challenges that others considered impossible. Safe, easy planets held no appeal for explorers who had cut their teeth on Earth's most hostile environments. Thank you for the offer, Ambassador, but we're committed to the Zarion 7 expedition. We've prepared for it, planned for it, and frankly, we're excited about it. The alien representatives signed off one by one, each expressing their certainty that they would never hear from the human team again. As the last transmission ended, Rodriguez looked around at his teammates. So, are we actually doing this? Going to a planet that has killed thousands of aliens just to prove a point? Morrison grinned. Sam, my friend, we're not trying to prove a point. We're going camping on the most interesting planet we've ever seen. Chen laughed. And maybe we'll make some scientific discoveries that advance galactic knowledge by a few centuries. Pete was already plotting their descent trajectory. Plus, think of the stories we'll have to tell when we get back. The human team finished. Loading their equipment, completely unaware that their casual confidence in the face of galactic-scale terror was about to become the stuff of legend. The landing shuttle touched down on Zarian 7's surface with a soft thud that somehow felt ominous. Outside the viewport, the alien landscape stretched in all directions under a sky the color of old brass. Morrison checked his environmental suit's readings and nodded to his team. "Atmospheric processors are running clean," he announced. "Gravity is registering at 2.8 times Earth standard. Temperature is holding steady at 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Not bad for what the galaxy calls impossible conditions." Chen was already taking readings through the shuttle's sensors. "Biochemical activity is off the charts. This place is absolutely teeming with life." She paused, studying her instruments. "Some of these readings don't match any known biological patterns." Rodriguez was checking their equipment loadout one final time. "All gear secured and ready for deployment. Shelter components tested and verified. Weapons charged and calibrated. For the local conditions." Pete was monitoring their communication systems. "Contact with the Wanderer is stable. Emergency beacon is active. Navigation systems are compensating for the local magnetic anomalies." Morrison took a deep breath and reached for the door controls. "All right, people. Let's go see what all the fuss is about." The shuttle's door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The team stepped out onto soil that crunched under their boots like broken glass. The air shimmered with heat distortion, and the horizon wavered like a mirage. "Air quality is within acceptable parameters," Chen reported, checking her readings. "The atmospheric processors are handling the acid content without any problems." Morrison looked around at the jagged landscape. Crystalline formations jutted from the ground at odd angles, catching the alien sunlight and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth against the yellow sky. "It's actually quite beautiful," he said, surprising himself. Harsh, but beautiful. That was when the Razorhounds attacked. The pack emerged from behind a cluster of crystal formations with the silent coordination of wolves. Six-legged creatures the size of large dogs. Their claws gleamed like polished metal and their eyes burned with predatory intelligence. "Contact!" Rodriguez shouted, raising his kinetic rifle. 6 targets, approaching from the northeast." The Razorhounds moved with liquid grace, spreading out to surround the human team. Morrison had seen this behavior before in Earth's predators, but these creatures moved with mechanical precision that suggested intelligence far beyond normal animals. "Wait!" Chen called out, watching the pack's movements through her scanner. "Look at their approach pattern. They're testing us, not attacking yet. They want to understand what we are before they commit to a fight." Morrison kept his weapon ready, but didn't fire. "Just like wolves," he murmured. "They're smart enough to be cautious about unknown prey." The lead Razorhound, slightly larger than the others, stopped about 20 meters away. It tilted its head, studying the humans with eyes. That seemed almost curious. Its packmates moved in a slow circle, maintaining distance but keeping the team surrounded. Rodriguez had his sonic deterrent ready. "Captain, these things are supposed to be unstoppable killers. The report said they tore through armored soldiers. Like paper. Armored soldiers who probably started shooting the moment they saw movement, Morrison replied. Let's try a different approach. He slowly crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. The lead razor hound's ears twitched forward, a gesture that reminded Morrison of every dog he had ever worked with in search and rescue operations. They're pack hunters, he said quietly to his team. That means they follow behavioral rules. They're not mindless killing machines. They're trying to figure out if we're prey, predators, or something else entirely. Chen was studying her readings. Their electromagnetic signatures are fascinating. They're not just using sight and smell for hunting. They can detect our equipment's energy outputs. Pete was watching the pack's formation. They're maintaining communication somehow. Look at how they move together without any visible signals. Rodriguez slowly activated his sonic deterrent, not as a weapon, but as a test. The high-frequency sound made the razor hounds step back, but they didn't flee. Instead, they seemed to analyze the sound, tilting their heads and adjusting their positions. They're learning, Chen observed. Each interaction teaches them something new about us. Morrison made a decision that would have terrified most galactic species. He stood up slowly and took a step toward the pack leader. The creature tensed, but didn't retreat. Easy, Morrison said softly, using the same tone he had used with countless wild animals on Earth. We're not here to hurt you. We're just passing through your territory. The razor hound leader made a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a chirp. Its packmates responded with similar sounds, creating a complex pattern of communication. Are they talking? Pete asked, recording the sounds. Everything talks, Morrison replied. The question is whether we're smart enough to listen. For several tense minutes, the two groups studied each other. The humans remained calm and non-threatening while the razor hounds evaluated this new type of visitor. Finally, the pack leader made a decision. It backed away slowly, making sounds that caused the other pack members to withdraw as well. They're leaving, Rodriguez said, hardly believing it. Not leaving, Morrison corrected. They're giving us space. There's a difference. As the razor hounds disappeared back into the crystal formations, Chen was already analyzing the encounter. The previous expeditions must have triggered their defensive responses immediately. Soldiers with weapons, scientists with loud equipment, everyone acting like invaders. We acted like visitors, Morrison said. Respectful visitors who understood we were in someone else's home. Pete was setting up their communication array when his seismic sensors began registering movement underground. The readings showed something massive moving through tunnels beneath their feet. Tunnel stalkers, Rodriguez said, reading the identification patterns from their database. These things can collapse entire areas. The insectoid swarm lost 300 individuals when the ground opened up beneath them. Chen was studying the seismic patterns. Look at the movement vectors. They're following natural fault lines in the rock. The geological instability isn't random. It's being caused by creatures that understand the planet's structure better than any surface dweller. Morrison was already selecting a new location for their base camp. Then we don't camp on unstable ground. We choose high ground with solid bedrock foundations, just like we would in an avalanche zone. Pete was tracking the underground movements. The tunnel stalkers seemed to be avoiding this ridgeline, probably too much solid rock for them to move through easily. Rodriguez was setting up their early warning systems. If we can predict their movement patterns, we can avoid areas where they're likely to destabilize the surface. As the team established their first camp on Zerion 7, they worked with the systematic efficiency of people who had spent their lives dealing with dangerous environments. Each threat was analyzed, understood and countered with practical solutions, based on Earth-tested experience. Chen was cataloging the local flora when she made a discovery. These crystal formations aren't just geological features. They're showing signs of biological activity. I think they might be some kind of living mineral hybrid. Morrison looked at the rainbow-colored crystals surrounding their camp. Are they dangerous? Unknown, Chen replied, but they're definitely responding to our presence. The electromagnetic activity increased when we arrived. Pete was monitoring their communication systems when he noticed something odd. The crystals are affecting our radio signals, not blocking them, but modifying them somehow. Rodriguez tested their equipment carefully. Everything's still functional, but the energy readings are fluctuating in patterns that match the crystal activity. As night fell on their first day on Zarian 7, the human team settled into their camp routine. They had survived the first encounters with two of the planet's most feared threats through patience, observation, and respect for the environment they were visiting. Morrison made his daily log entry. Day 1 complete. Encountered local wildlife and geological features as expected. Team is in good health and spirits. Environmental systems functioning normally. Weather looks stable for tomorrow's survey work. He didn't mention that they had just done something the galaxy considered impossible. Spent 6 hours on Zarian 7 and lived to tell about it. To Morrison and his team, it had been just another day of field work in challenging conditions. On their third day on Zarian 7, the human team encountered something that had driven entire civilizations to madness. The singing crystals rose from the planet's surface like a forest of glass spears, each one humming with frequencies that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the mind. Chen checked her instruments as they approached the crystal field. Psychic resonance is off the charts. These formations are generating patterns that affect neural activity directly. Rodriguez was studying the reports from previous expeditions. The Melodic Empire lost 47 researchers here. Complete. Mental breakdown within 3 minutes of exposure. The survivors never recovered their sanity. Morrison felt the first effects as they crested the hill overlooking the crystal forest. A low humming sensation in his skull, like tinnitus but more complex. Patterns of sound that tried to force themselves into thoughts. Anyone else hearing music that isn't quite music? Pete asked, touching his helmet. It's not really sound, Chen said, reading her scanners. It's electromagnetic fields that resonate with neural tissue. The crystals are essentially broadcasting directly into our brains. The team stopped at the edge of the crystal field. Morrison could feel the alien frequencies trying to establish patterns in his mind, like a song that demanded to be sung along with. The sensation was uncomfortable but not overwhelming. It's like having a radio station you can't tune out, Rodriguez observed. Annoying but not exactly maddening. Chen was comparing the crystal frequencies to human neural patterns. This is fascinating. The crystals are generating uniform, repetitive patterns. Most galactic species have highly organized neural structures that would be easily overwhelmed by this kind of input. But human brains are different, Morrison realized. We evolved in chaos. Earth's electromagnetic environment is constantly shifting due to solar radiation, magnetic field fluctuations, and atmospheric interference. Pete was running tests on their communication equipment. Our neural patterns are adapted to filter background noise. These crystal frequencies register as just another type of interference to ignore. Chen nodded excitedly. Exactly. Human consciousness developed in one of the most electromagnetically chaotic environments in the galaxy. We're naturally resistant to uniform psychic frequencies because our brains expect chaos, not order. Morrison made a decision that would have horrified galactic authorities. Let's go in, but we stay together, monitor each other for any behavioral changes, and retreat immediately if anyone shows signs of distress. The team entered the crystal forest carefully. The humming in their minds grew stronger, but remained manageable. The crystals towered above them, each one singing with a different tone that created complex harmonies in the alien air. Rodriguez was examining the crystal structures. These formations are incredibly pure. The metallic content could be useful for equipment repairs. Are you suggesting we harvest psychic madness crystals for spare parts? Pete asked with dry humor. I'm suggesting we treat them like any other useful mineral deposit, Rodriguez replied, with proper precautions and respect for the environment. Chen was taking detailed readings of the crystal matrix. The psychic effects seemed to be a byproduct of their growth patterns, not their primary function. They're processing electromagnetic energy from the planet's core and converting it into these resonance patterns. Morrison was navigating through the crystal maze when his scanner detected something unexpected. There's a clear path through the center of the formation. These crystals aren't randomly placed. As they followed the path, the team discovered that the crystal forest was actually an enormous structure with definite organization. The largest crystals formed natural corridors, while smaller formations created chambers and alcoves. It's like a city, Pete observed, or maybe a circuit board. Each crystal is positioned to interact with the others in specific ways. Chen was recording everything. The psychic frequencies are strongest at certain nodes where multiple crystals converge. The path we're following avoids those high-intensity areas. Rodriguez stopped to examine a cluster of smaller crystals. Look at the wear patterns on these formations. Something has been moving through here regularly. The crystals show signs of deliberate harvesting. Morrison studied the evidence. Previous expeditions couldn't survive the psychic effects long, enough to explore properly. They assumed the crystals were purely hostile. But what if they're part of a larger ecosystem? The team spent several hours mapping the crystal forest's structure. What had appeared to be a chaotic maze of deadly formations revealed itself to be a complex system with clear organization and purpose. Chen made a breakthrough when she analyzed the crystal harmonics in detail. The frequencies aren't random or malevolent. They're communicating. The crystals are exchanging information through electromagnetic resonance. Information about what? Morrison asked. About us, Pete realized. They've been scanning us since we arrived. The psychic frequencies are how they analyze visitors. Rodriguez was carefully collecting samples from damaged crystal formations. The previous expeditions were driven mad because they tried to fight the scanning process. Their minds couldn't handle the forced neural resonance. Morrison nodded. But our brains just filtered it out as background noise. We let the crystals scan us without resistance. So there was no neural conflict. The team discovered something even more remarkable as they reached the center of the crystal forest. A massive formation rose from the ground like a natural cathedral, its faceted surfaces reflecting rainbow patterns across the alien sky. Chen's instruments went wild as they approached the central spire. The electromagnetic activity here is incredible. This crystal is processing energy on a planetary scale. It's beautiful, Pete said softly. The central crystal sang with harmonies that seemed to capture the music of the spheres themselves. Morrison felt something he had never experienced before. The crystal's frequency patterns, instead of creating chaos in his mind, seemed to organize his thoughts with perfect clarity. For a moment he could sense the entire planet as a living system. "Do you feel that?" he asked his team. "Yeah," Rodriguez said quietly. "It's like the planet is welcoming us." Chen was studying her readings with amazement. "The central crystal isn't just processing energy. It's integrating our neural patterns into the planet's electromagnetic field. We're being accepted as part of the local ecosystem." The realization hit them all at once. The singing crystals weren't weapons or hazards. They were Xerion 7's way of determining whether visitors were compatible with the planet's unique environment. Species with rigid neural patterns were rejected violently. But humans, with their chaotic and adaptable neural structures, passed the test. Morrison made his log entry that evening. Encountered major crystal formations in Sector 7. Initial electromagnetic interference resolved through equipment calibration. Crystals show potential as natural energy processors. Recommend further study of their technological applications. He didn't mention that they had just passed an intelligence test that had destroyed 47 alien minds. To the human team, it had been an interesting afternoon studying unusual geological formations. As they prepared to move deeper into Xerion 7's mysteries, the crystals sang them to sleep with harmonies that somehow made perfect sense to minds evolved in Earth's electromagnetic chaos. The next morning, Rodriguez had an idea that would revolutionize their expedition. If these crystals can interface with our neural patterns without causing damage, maybe we can use them to enhance our equipment. Chen was already running calculations. The electromagnetic processing capabilities could boost our sensors dramatically. We could map the entire planet in detail instead of just our immediate area. Pete was testing integration possibilities, and the communication enhancement could let us stay in contact with the ship even through the reality storms. Morrison smiled as he watched his team turn a galactic terror into a useful tool. "Just remember to be respectful. We're guests here, and our hosts have been kind enough to share their technology." The crystal formations pulsed with gentle light, as if approving of the humans' approach. What other species had seen as impossible madness, humans had transformed into partnership. On their 8th day on Xerion 7, the human team encountered the legend that had given the planet its fearsome reputation. The Void Stalker appeared during their evening meal preparation, manifesting from empty air like a nightmare given form. The creature was unlike anything they had seen before. Roughly the size of a large bear, but built like a predatory cat, its body seemed to exist only partially in normal space. Parts of it faded in and out of visibility, and when it moved, it left trails of distorted air that hurt to look at directly. Morrison was checking their perimeter sensors when the creature first appeared. "Contact," he said calmly, reaching for his weapon. Unknown entity, approximately 30 meters from camp. Chen looked up from her data analysis and froze. The Void Stalker was studying them with eyes that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. Intelligence burned in that alien gaze, an intelligence that felt ancient and utterly foreign. "That's impossible," Rodriguez whispered, checking his scanners. "The readings are all over the place. It's like the thing exists in multiple dimensions at once." Pete was trying to get clear visual recordings, but his cameras couldn't seem to focus properly on the creature. "The electromagnetic distortion around it is incredible. It's interfering with our equipment just by being here." The Void Stalker circled their camp slowly, never taking its eyes off the humans. When it moved, space seemed to bend around it, creating visual distortions that made tracking its exact position nearly impossible. Morrison kept his weapon ready, but didn't fire. Something about the creature's behavior reminded him of the Razorhound pack leader. It was cautious, curious, testing the humans rather than attacking immediately. It's studying us, Chen realized. Look at how it moves. It's trying to understand what we are. The creature suddenly vanished, disappearing so completely that even their sensors lost track of it. For a moment, the team thought it had left. Then Pete noticed something that made his blood run cold. "It's inside the camp," he said quietly. "The electromagnetic readings are coming from right behind you, Captain." Morrison turned slowly and found himself face to face with the Void Stalker. The creature had somehow passed through their shelter walls without disturbing them. It stood less than 3 meters away, watching him with those impossible eyes. "Easy," Morrison said softly, using the same tone that had worked with the Razorhounds. "We're not here to hurt you." The Void Stalker tilted its head, and Morrison could swear he saw curiosity in its expression. The creature took a step closer, and Morrison fought every instinct that told him to run or fight. Chen was quietly recording everything. "It's not fully corporeal," she whispered. "Most of its mass exists in parallel dimensions. That's why our sensors can't get consistent readings." Rodriguez was studying the creature's phase patterns. "It has to become solid to interact with our reality. That's when it's most vulnerable, but also when it can cause the most damage." The Void Stalker seemed to hear their quiet conversation. It looked at each team member in turn, as if evaluating their individual threat levels. Then it did something that changed everything. It sat down. The simple gesture was so unexpected that Morrison almost laughed. Here was the galaxy's most feared predator, the creature that had destroyed 3 expeditions single-handedly, sitting like a curious dog waiting for attention. "I think it wants to communicate," Pete said, carefully adjusting his recording equipment to better capture the creature's dimensional signatures. Chen was analyzing the Void Stalker's energy patterns. The phase shifting isn't random. There are mathematical relationships in how it moves between dimensions. It's following quantum mechanical principles. Morrison made a decision that would have been considered suicidal by every other species in the galaxy. He sat down as well, making himself less threatening and more approachable. The Void Stalker's eyes seemed to brighten with interest. It made a sound that was somewhere between a purr and the whisper of wind through empty space. The sound carried harmonics that reminded Morrison of the singing crystals. "It's trying to talk to us," he realized, using the same kind of electromagnetic patterns as the crystals. Chen quickly configured her scanners to analyze the creature's communication attempts. The frequency patterns are incredibly complex. It's not just making sounds, it's manipulating space-time to create information-carrying distortions. Pete was recording everything, trying to establish communication protocols. "Can we respond using our equipment to generate similar patterns?" Rodriguez was studying the creature's behavior with the eye of a survival expert. "Look at its posture. It's relaxed, curious. If it wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead." The Void Stalker seemed to understand that the humans were trying to communicate. It made more complex sounds, accompanied by subtle phase shifts that created visual patterns in the air around it. Chen was frantically analyzing the data. "It's not just communicating with us, it's trying to teach us its language. Each pattern builds on the previous one, like a lesson." Morrison felt a strange sensation, as if the creature's words were bypassing his ears and speaking directly to his mind. Not the forced intrusion of the singing crystals, but a gentle offering of communication. Over the next several hours, the team established basic communication with the Void Stalker. The process was slow and required intense concentration, but gradually they began to understand each other. The creature, it turned out, was not a predator in the traditional sense. It was something more like a guardian, protecting Zerion 7 from what it perceived as invasive threats. The previous expeditions had been destroyed because they approached the planet as conquerors rather than visitors. It's territorial, Morrison explained to his team. But it's not mindlessly aggressive. It's trying to protect something. Chen was studying the creature's dimensional nature. The phase shifting isn't just a hunting adaptation. It's how it monitors multiple areas of the planet simultaneously. It's like a living surveillance system. Pete had established a basic translation protocol using their communication equipment. It's asking us about our intentions, why we're here, what we want from the planet. Rodriguez was the first to understand the deeper implications. It's not just guarding territory, it's guarding the planet's development. Something important is happening here, and it doesn't want interference. Morrison spent the rest of the evening in careful conversation with the Void Stalker. Through patient exchange of concepts and ideas, he began to understand the creature's true nature and purpose. The Void Stalker was not native to Zerion 7. It was something much older, placed, here to protect the planet during a critical period of development. The hostile environment, the dangerous creatures, even the reality storms. They were all part of a natural process that required protection from outside interference. We're like park rangers, Morrison realized. And it's the senior ranger, making sure we understand the rules. Chen was amazed by the implications. If this is a protected development zone, then everything we've encountered makes sense. The planet isn't hostile. It's fragile. All these dangers are defense mechanisms. As the night wore on, the Void Stalker seemed to reach a decision about the human team. It rose to its feet and made a complex series of sounds and phase patterns that Pete's equipment translated as something like acceptable visitors. Then it did something unprecedented. It touched Morrison's hand with one translucent claw, and for a moment, he experienced the planet as the Void Stalker did. A living world in the process of transformation, vulnerable and precious beyond measure. When the creature disappeared back into whatever dimension it called home, Morrison sat quietly for a long time, processing what he had learned. We're not just exploring a dangerous planet, he told his team. We're witnessing something incredible. Something that happens maybe once in a million years. Chen nodded, understanding. And now we have permission to document it properly. Rodriguez checked their equipment, making sure everything was ready for the deeper exploration ahead. The senior ranger has given us access to the restricted areas. Pete was updating their mission logs. How do I explain that we just had a conversation with a multidimensional entity that guards planets? Morrison smiled. Simple. We encountered the local wildlife and established basic communication protocols, standard first contact procedures. The Void Stalker's acceptance changed everything about their mission. What had begun as a simple geological survey was becoming something far more significant. They weren't just proving that humans could survive on Zerion 7. They were documenting one of the universe's rarest and most precious phenomena, and they were doing it with the blessing of the galaxy's most feared predator, who had turned out to be its most dedicated protector. With the Void Stalker's acceptance, the human team pushed deeper into regions of Zerion 7 that no previous expedition had survived to explore. On their 15th day, they entered the fracture zones, where reality itself seemed to operate under different rules. Morrison checked his instruments as they approached the boundary. Gravitational readings are fluctuating between 2 and 5 times standard. Space-time distortion is increasing exponentially. Chen was monitoring their atmospheric processors. The air composition is shifting randomly. Oxygen levels, pressure, even molecular structure. Everything keeps changing. Rodriguez was testing their equipment carefully. Half our gear is reading normal. Half is giving impossible values. It's like we're walking into a place where physics can't make up its mind. Pete was struggling to maintain their communication link with the Wanderer. Signal transmission is becoming intermittent. The electromagnetic properties of space itself are unstable here. The landscape around them defied description. Plants grew in impossible colors that hurt to look at directly. Rocks floated in mid-air while water flowed upward in spiraling streams. In the distance, mountains appeared to exist in multiple locations, simultaneously. "It's like a living laboratory," Chen said with scientific excitement. "Every law of physics is being tested and modified in real time." Morrison was navigating using landmarks that kept shifting position. "The Zephyrian reports mentioned reality storms. I think we're walking into the area where they originate." The team had learned to work with Zerion 7's strange environment rather than fighting it. When their standard navigation failed, they used techniques adapted from cave exploration and mountain rescue. When their equipment gave contradictory readings, they relied on observation and experience. Rodriguez found evidence of previous expeditions scattered throughout the zone. Pieces of advanced technology lay broken and corroded, sometimes fused with rocks or growing strange crystalline formations. "Look at this," he called, examining a piece of insectoid swarm equipment. "The metal has been transformed into something that's part organic, part mineral. The atomic structure has been completely altered." Chen took samples carefully. "The molecular bonds have been rearranged at the quantum level. This is matter transformation beyond anything we've seen before." Pete discovered something even more disturbing. His scanners detected energy signatures from multiple time periods. "I'm reading chronometer data from equipment that hasn't been invented yet, and artifacts that are somehow older than the planet itself." Morrison was studying the spatial distortions when he realized what they were seeing. "This isn't random chaos. It's experimentation. Someone or something is testing the fundamental properties of reality." The team pressed forward, adapting to each new impossibility with the practiced flexibility of explorers who had learned to expect the unexpected. When gravity reversed direction, they secured themselves and continued working. When time flowed backward for several minutes, they simply noted the phenomenon and moved on. Chen made a breakthrough when she analyzed the pattern of reality distortions. "There's an underlying mathematical structure to all this chaos. The changes follow quantum probability curves, but they're being guided by some kind of organizing principle." Rodriguez was examining the transformed matter samples. "Whatever's causing these changes is incredibly sophisticated. It's not destroying the previous expedition's equipment. It's studying it, learning from it, incorporating it into something new." Morrison was beginning to understand the scope of what they were witnessing. Zerion 7 isn't just a dangerous planet. It's a testing ground. Someone is using this world to experiment with the fundamental nature of reality itself. Pete made contact with something unexpected as they reached the heart of the fracture zone. His communication equipment picked up signals that weren't from the Wanderer or any known source. "I'm receiving transmissions," he reported. "But they're not in any language or format I recognize. The patterns are incredibly complex, like mathematical equations expressed as music." Chen analyzed the signals and made a startling discovery. These aren't random transmissions. They're conversations. Multiple entities are communicating with each other using information structures we can barely comprehend. The team discovered that the fracture zone was inhabited, but not by anything they could easily recognize as life. Patterns of energy moved through the distorted space like living thoughts, manipulating matter and reality according to incomprehensible purposes. Morrison made contact using principles learned from their communication with the Void Stalker. Instead of trying to impose human concepts on the alien intelligence, he allowed his thoughts to adapt to their mode of expression. The result was overwhelming. For a brief moment, Morrison experienced consciousness on a scale that spanned dimensions. He saw Zarian 7 as part of a vast experiment in the evolution of reality itself, a laboratory where advanced beings tested the fundamental nature of existence. They're gardeners, he explained to his team afterward. But instead of growing plants, they're growing new forms of reality. Zarian 7 is their greenhouse. Chen was analyzing the data from Morrison's contact. The implications are staggering. They're not just studying physics, they're creating new physical laws. The dangerous conditions on this planet are side effects of their reality experiments. Rodriguez understood the practical implications. That's why previous expeditions failed so catastrophically. They weren't just encountering hostile environment, they were interfering with experiments that operate on universal scales. Pete was recording everything, though he wasn't sure their equipment could capture the true nature of what they were witnessing. How do you document beings that exist as pure mathematical concepts? The team spent several days in the fracture zone, carefully observing and documenting the reality experiments. They learned to recognize the signs of active manipulation and to avoid interfering with ongoing tests. Chen made discoveries that would revolutionize galactic understanding of physics. She observed matter being converted directly into energy, and back again, space being folded and unfolded like origami, and time being stretched and compressed like elastic. Rodriguez found that some of the transformed equipment from previous expeditions had been improved rather than destroyed. Alien technology had been analyzed, understood, and rebuilt according to superior principles. Morrison established limited communication with the reality gardeners. The exchange was difficult and exhausting, but he learned that the experiments were approaching a critical phase. Zarian 7 was becoming something unprecedented, a world where multiple forms of reality could coexist. It's like they're creating a universal laboratory, he explained, a place where different physical laws can be tested side by side without destroying each other. Pete discovered that the reality experiments were connected to the planet's other phenomena. The singing crystals were data storage devices, recording the results of each test. The Void Stalker was a guardian, ensuring that the experiments weren't contaminated by outside interference. Everything we've encountered has been part of this larger project, Chen realized. The hostile environment, the dangerous creatures, even the failed expeditions. They're all data points in an experiment that spans cosmic timescales. The team made a decision that would have been impossible for any other species. Instead of trying to claim or control this incredible discovery, they chose to protect it. They understood that they were witnessing something far more important than any single expedition or scientific advance. Morrison updated their mission logs with careful understatement. Encountered unusual geological and physical phenomena in the planet's interior regions. Local conditions require specialized equipment and training. Recommend restricted access for future expeditions. He didn't mention that they had just discovered the greatest scientific achievement in the known universe. Some secrets were too important to share with a galaxy that wasn't ready to understand them. As they prepared to leave the fracture zone, the reality gardeners offered them a gift, a small crystal that contained compressed information about the fundamental nature of existence itself. Chen accepted the gift with appropriate reverence. This represents knowledge that could advance human science by thousands of years. Morrison nodded, and the responsibility to use it wisely. The team left the fracture zone with more questions than answers, but with a deep understanding that they had been privileged to witness something truly extraordinary. They were no longer just explorers documenting a dangerous planet. They were guardians of a secret that could change the nature of reality itself. On their 23rd day on Zerion 7, the human team reached the planet's most dangerous and mysterious region, the Convergence Zone. Here, the reality experiments had created something that shouldn't exist, a place where multiple dimensions intersected and overlapped in impossible ways. Morrison studied their approach route carefully. According to the scanners, we're looking at a space that's simultaneously solid, liquid, gas, and something that doesn't fit any known state of matter. Chen was monitoring their life support systems. Our atmospheric processors are struggling to define what atmosphere means here. The air keeps changing into things that aren't air, then changing back. Rodriguez was checking their equipment one final time. Half our gear is reading normal values, a quarter is giving impossible readings, and the rest isn't reading anything at all. It's like we're approaching a place that reality can't quite figure out how to handle. Pete was losing contact with the Wanderer as electromagnetic space itself became unstable. Communication is becoming intermittent. The signal has to find its way through dimensions that keep shifting position. The landscape before them defied every law of physics the team understood. Mountains existed in multiple states simultaneously: solid rock, flowing liquid, and pure energy. Rivers flowed through air while clouds moved underground. Plants grew downward into the sky while their roots reached upward into the soil. "It's beautiful and terrifying," Chen said softly. "Like watching the universe experiment with new ways to exist." Morrison was navigating using techniques adapted from theoretical physics rather than traditional exploration. "We'll move in coordinated steps. Everyone stays within 5 meters of each other. If reality shifts around us, we stay together no matter what." The team entered the convergence zone using techniques they had developed for dealing with the planet's other impossible regions. They moved slowly, observed carefully, and adapted to each new impossibility as it presented itself. Rodriguez discovered that their equipment worked better when they stopped trying to force it to operate according to normal physical laws. The scanners are more accurate when I let them define their own parameters instead of using standard settings. Chen was documenting phenomena that had no names in any scientific language. "I'm observing matter that exists in 17 dimensions. Simultaneously, energy that flows backward through time. Plants that photosynthesize using pure mathematics instead of light." Pete found that communication was possible in the convergence zone, but it required thinking in ways that hurt his brain. "I can maintain contact with the ship, but I have to route the signal through dimensions that technically don't exist." Morrison was using principles learned from their encounters with the Void Stalker and the Reality Gardeners. Instead of trying to impose human logic on the impossible environment, he allowed his thinking to adapt to the zone's unique properties. "Don't fight it," he advised his team. "Let the zone teach you how to exist here." The deeper they went into the convergence zone, the more apparent it became that this was the heart of the reality experiments. Here, The cosmic gardeners were testing the most fundamental aspects of existence itself. Chen made a discovery that changed her understanding of the entire universe. The convergent zone isn't an accident or a side effect. It's the point where all possible realities intersect. Every universe that could exist touches this spot. Rodriguez was studying the remains of previous expeditions scattered throughout the zone. The equipment here hasn't been destroyed or transformed. It's been integrated. Pieces of alien technology have become part of the zone's structure. Pete was detecting signals from impossibly distant sources. I'm receiving transmissions from civilizations that won't exist for millions of years, and others that died out billions of years ago. Time isn't linear here. Morrison realized they were approaching the source of all the phenomena they had encountered on Zirion 7. This is where it all begins. The reality experiments, the dimensional guardians, the cosmic garden. Everything starts here. At the center of the convergence zone, they found something that challenged their understanding of existence itself, a structure that was simultaneously ancient and newly created, massive and infinitely small, solid and intangible. It's a machine, Chen whispered, but it's made of concepts instead of matter. It's building reality itself. Rodriguez was studying the structure's impossible geometry. Every piece of equipment from the failed expeditions is here, but they've become part of something larger. The machine is using their technology to improve itself. Pete was receiving communications from the structure itself. It's trying to talk to us, but the language is... It's not words or math or anything we have concepts for. Morrison approached the reality engine with the same respectful caution he had used with every other aspect of Zirion 7. He understood that they were in the presence of something far beyond human comprehension, but also something that had allowed them to survive this long. The communication that followed was unlike anything they had experienced. The reality engine didn't use words or thoughts or even concepts. It shared experiences directly, showing them the history and purpose of its cosmic work. Morrison learned that Zirion 7 was one of countless experimental sites scattered throughout the universe. Each one was testing different aspects of reality, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The goal was to create a new form of existence that could survive the eventual heat death of the universe. It's trying to save everything, he explained, to his team. When this universe ends, the new forms of reality being developed here will allow consciousness and life to continue in ways we can't imagine. Chen was overwhelmed by the implications. The scale is incredible. They're not just creating new physical laws. They're creating new forms of existence that transcend physics entirely. Rodriguez understood why the previous expeditions had failed so catastrophically. They approached this as conquerors or researchers. But you can't conquer or study something that's trying to preserve the entire universe. You can only try to help. Pete was documenting everything, though he knew their equipment couldn't capture the true nature of what they were witnessing. How do you record something that exists in dimensions we don't have words for? The reality engine offered them something unprecedented, the chance to become part of the cosmic experiment. Not as subjects or tools, but as conscious participants, in the creation of new forms of existence. Morrison felt the weight of the decision. Accepting would mean transcending human limitations and becoming something unimaginably greater. Refusing would mean returning to normal existence with the knowledge that they had turned down cosmic immortality. "We're explorers," he said finally. "Our job is to bring knowledge back to our people, not to abandon them for greater adventures." The reality engine seemed to understand and approve of their choice. It offered them a different gift, knowledge that would help humanity prepare for the cosmic challenges ahead, and the responsibility to guide their species toward eventual participation in the universal experiment. Chen accepted the gift carefully, understanding that it came with enormous responsibility. This knowledge could advance human civilization by millions of years, but it has to be shared slowly, carefully, at the right pace. Rodriguez was studying the transformed equipment from previous expeditions. The machine has learned from every species that's encountered it. It's building a database of consciousness itself. Pete realized the true purpose of the failed expeditions. They weren't failures at all. They were contributions. Every mind that encountered this place added to the machine's understanding of life and consciousness. Morrison made his decision about how to report their discovery. The galaxy wasn't ready for this knowledge. Most species would try to exploit or control the reality engine, which would destroy both them and the cosmic experiment. "We'll recommend that Zarion 7 remain restricted," he told his team. "But we'll also start preparing humanity for the day when we can return here as full participants." As they prepared to leave the convergence zone, the reality engine showed them one final vision: the universe as it would become when the experiment was complete. A place where consciousness could exist in infinite forms, where death was just another state of being, and where the end of physical reality would mark the beginning of something unimaginably greater. The team left the heart of Zarion 7 with the weight of cosmic responsibility on their shoulders. They had discovered the greatest secret in the universe, and now they had to decide how to protect it while preparing their species for an eventual role in saving everything that would ever exist. Morrison updated their mission logs with his usual understated professionalism. Completed survey of planet's central regions. Encountered advanced technological artifacts requiring further study. Recommend continued restricted access pending development of appropriate protocols. He didn't mention that they had just been offered a chance to transcend mortality and help save the universe. Some discoveries were too big to fit in a simple expedition report. On their 37th day on Zarion 7, the human expedition team prepared to return home. They had spent over a month on a planet that had killed previous expeditions within hours, and they were not only alive, but in excellent health and spirits. Morrison was conducting his final equipment check when the Void Stalker appeared one last time. The Dimensional Guardian materialized near their camp, no longer the terrifying predator that had stalked their early days, but something more like an old friend saying goodbye. "I think it's here to see us off," Morrison said, approaching the creature with the casual confidence of someone who had learned to communicate across impossible barriers. The Void Stalker made the complex harmonics that served as its language, and Pete's translation equipment rendered the meaning as something like "safe journey, approved visitors." Chen was carefully packing the samples and data they had collected, each item representing discoveries that would revolutionize galactic science. 37 days of data from a planet the galaxy considers unsurvivable. This will keep researchers busy for decades. Rodriguez was loading their equipment, most of it still functional despite exposure to conditions that had destroyed advanced military hardware. Everything held up better than expected. The environmental adaptations we made actually improved our gear's performance. Pete was establishing final communication with the Wanderer for their departure. "The ship reports all systems normal. They're standing by for our return." Morrison took one last look around the alien landscape that had become familiar and oddly comfortable. The crystal formations sang their harmonic farewells. The reality storms danced in the distance, and the razor hounds watched from their territorial boundaries with what might have been respect. "It's been a hell of a camping trip," he said with satisfaction. The shuttle lifted off from Xerion 7's surface without incident, carrying the team back to orbit and the waiting research vessel. As they rose through the atmosphere, Morrison made his final log entry. Expedition complete. 37 days on Xerion 7 conducting geological and biological surveys. Team health excellent. Equipment performance above expectations. Recommend. Planet for further research expeditions with proper preparation and training. He paused, considering how to summarize what they had really accomplished. How do you explain that you had survived the unsurvivable, communicated with cosmic intelligences, and been offered a chance to transcend mortality itself? Encountered some interesting local wildlife and unusual weather patterns, he added. Beautiful planet. Would definitely visit again. Aboard the Wanderer, the team settled into the familiar routine of post-expedition analysis. Chen began processing their samples, Rodriguez cataloged their equipment modifications, and Pete compiled their communication records. Morrison was reviewing their scientific findings when the first response arrived from the Galactic Survey Council. Ambassador Thelvox's message was brief and contained what humans had learned to recognize as complete bewilderment. Captain Morrison, please confirm your status. Our sensors indicate your expedition has been on Xerion 7 for 37 days. This is clearly impossible. Morrison responded with characteristic understatement. Expedition status confirmed. All team members healthy and accounted for. Survey objectives completed successfully. The responses that followed came from across the galaxy as news of the human team's survival spread through alien communication networks. Each message expressed the same theme. What the humans had done was impossible. The Zephyrian military commander, who had lost his entire unit, was the most direct. How are you alive? My soldiers had the finest equipment and training in the galaxy. They lasted 4 hours. Chen answered that one. Different approach to environmental challenges. We adapted our methods to work with local conditions rather than against them. The insectoid swarm representative was equally confused. Our hive consciousness allowed perfect coordination and shared sensory data. The planet scattered us across multiple dimensions within hours. Pete handled that response. Dimensional navigation requires understanding quantum mechanical principles. Once you recognize the mathematical patterns, the reality storms become predictable. The Melodic Empire's delegates sent increasingly frantic harmonies expressing disbelief. The singing crystals drove our most mentally resilient individuals insane within minutes. How did you survive the psychic assault? Morrison answered personally. We didn't experience it as an assault. Our neural patterns seem naturally compatible with the crystal frequencies. We found them quite musical, actually, as reports of the human expedition's success spread throughout galactic civilization. The responses ranged from amazement to skepticism to outright denial. Most species simply couldn't accept that what they considered impossible had been achieved with such apparent ease. Admiral Kate Fisher, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, received the team's full report 3 days after their return to orbit. Her response was typically human. Outstanding work, team. Preliminary analysis suggests your findings will advance our understanding of exotic physics by several centuries. Recommend immediate classification of all data pending proper security review. She paused before adding, also recommend you take some well-deserved leave. I suspect you'll be giving a lot of briefings in the coming months. The Galactic Council's Emergency session convened within a week of receiving the human expedition report. Representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered to try to understand how humans had survived where everyone else had failed catastrophically. Admiral Fisher attended the session to answer questions, though she carefully limited her responses to the official expedition findings. The deeper discoveries, the reality experiments, the cosmic gardeners, the Universal Preservation Project, remained classified at the highest levels. The human team approached Xerion 7 as a challenging environment rather than an impossible obstacle, she explained to the assembled delegates. They used survival techniques developed on Earth, which has one of the more hostile environments known to galactic civilization. Ambassador Thelvox asked the question that was troubling every non-human representative. Admiral Fisher, are you suggesting that Earth is more dangerous than Xerion 7? Fisher considered the question carefully. Earth has grizzly bears, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, earthquakes, poisonous plants, venomous animals, avalanche zones, desert wastelands, Arctic storms, and acid rain. Our oceans contain predators that can swallow small spacecraft. Our weather systems regularly destroy entire cities. She paused to let that sink in before continuing. Humans have been surviving in hostile environments for our entire evolutionary history. Xerion 7 was challenging, but it wasn't beyond our experience. The alien delegates exchanged looks of growing understanding. They had been thinking of humans as a typical galactic species adapted to the kind of gentle worlds that most civilizations considered normal. The reality was very different. The Crystalline Collective's representative chimed nervously. Are you saying that Earth itself is what you would classify as a death world? We prefer to think of it as home, Fisher replied. But yes, by galactic standards, Earth would probably be classified as extremely hostile to most forms of life. The implications were staggering. If humans considered Xerion 7 merely challenging rather than impossible, what other extinction-class worlds might be suitable for human exploration? Morrison was reviewing the final expedition reports when Pete made an observation that captured the entire experience perfectly. You know what's funny? We spent over a month on the galaxy's most feared planet, made friends with its most dangerous. Predator discovered the secret of reality itself and got offered cosmic immortality. And, Morrison prompted, and I'm already looking forward to our next hiking trip. Chen laughed. Speaking of which, I've been reviewing the restricted planet database. There's this volcanic world that the Council considers absolutely unsurvivable. The surface temperature reaches 800 degrees, it rains molten metal, and the atmosphere is mostly sulfur dioxide. Rodriguez was already interested. Sounds like a good challenge. What's the local wildlife situation? Silicon-based predators that hunt by detecting thermal signatures, Chen read. Highly intelligent, extremely aggressive, and apparently impossible to kill with conventional weapons. Morrison was pulling up the planetary data. Interesting terrain, features. Look at these lava tube systems. They're like natural highway networks, and the mineral deposits are incredible. Pete was already planning communication protocols. Silicon-based intelligence might use completely different information structures. Could be fascinating to establish contact. Admiral Fisher received their next expedition request 2 weeks later. The planet in question was classified as Extinction Class Plus, which meant it was considered unsurvivable even by the standards of worlds that were already considered unsurvivable. She approved the mission without hesitation. If there was one thing humanity had learned, it was that the galaxy's definition of impossible was usually just another word for interesting. As the human team prepared for their next adventure, Morrison updated his personal log with the kind of casual observation that had become his trademark. Great hiking spot, beautiful views, interesting wildlife, 5 stars, would definitely visit again. Bring good boots and pack extra water. Oh, and maybe some real